morning. Good morning, everyone. I'm Ben Kempinen. I think I know most of you. I'm the chair of our social ministry committee. And I wanted to basically provide a brief introduction to our guest. And first, I think it's important to say, mientras celebramos la reformación, quiero dar una cálida bienvenidos a nuestros estimados invitados de la Parroquia Santa Maria, which means as we celebrate Reformation Sunday, I wanted to give a warm welcome to our friends and our guests from the Santa Maria Church here in Madison. I'd like to introduce Pastor Kirsten Worzala Dumke, and there's other members that have been kind enough to take from their time and join us today. And before I turn it over to Kirsten, and people would know me, know that if you give me a mic, I'm going to be up here for a couple of minutes. That's just kind of the way it goes. But in any event, we have had at Midvale a connection to Santa Maria for some time, somewhat officially since 2020. We've tried to think of them in our social ministry budget and thank all the congregation for their support and hope to do so and increase our support in the coming years. We've also, as they we're in the process of trying to find a permanent pastor, Kirsten, we provided help with sort of the program which sponsored somebody to provide services for them during the pandemic. They certainly share our vision of being a community of faith and are certainly, and I'm excited about exploring, having us learn more about what they do in ways that we can work together as members of the community. So without further ado, let me introduce to you Pastor Worzala Dumke.
Thank you all so much. It really is a delight and joy to be with you all today. We had the pleasure of spending some time here as our children did VBS with you this summer. My spouse happens to be the associate pastor at Lutheran Memorial. And so it was fun to bring these two communities together and to be able to see our children enjoy your space and talents and gifts. So thank you. It's fun to be back with you all. I do want to be able to introduce you to a few of our other members who will be presenting with us today before I share a little bit more about Santa Maria. So Kate Grover-Griss is a known person here as well at Midvale, and Juan Carlos Cabrera is one of our members also. They will be sharing a bit about Day of the Dead with us today. And then Judith is in the back, and Mani, her spouse, is here as well, and they are beloved and wonderful leaders of Santa Maria and have been for a long, long time. So to share a bit about who we are, we came, well, it's a kind of a long roundabout story, but many members of Santa Maria were part of the Lutheran Spanish-speaking ministry at Bethel that started several years ago, 2006 maybe, or before that? Before that. So a while ago, Bethel had a Spanish-speaking ministry that was kind of embedded in Bethel. And then at some point, the Synod started talking about, where else can we grow? What else can we do? And Santa Maria was born and started officially in 2016 in Fitchburg at All Saints Lutheran, sharing that space and being housed, renting that space there with them. And then, gosh, just right around 2 years ago, we moved over to Lutheran Memorial Church downtown, which is a nice central space for our members. It shares this Gothic, Catholic-looking sanctuary, which feels very at home for many of us. And it's just been a very nice partnership. We are our own separate congregation that has the blessing and welcome of Lutheran Memorial, but we are not necessarily tied to Lutheran Memorial Church. So we're continuing to reframe and rethink how we navigate church in this ever-changing dynamic that we live in. I'm very proud of this community because we have amazing leaders. We have incredible gifts in ministry and folks who really have such a passion for continuing to serve the Spanish-speaking community in the area, and also really celebrate and honor our gifts and walk along with each other as we worship God and be Christ in the world. So it is a gift for me to be welcomed into that space. And I've known many folks from Santa Maria for several years now. We do want to take a little time to, again, thank you all for your partnership as well. So as we rethink how we do church, one of my joys has been to get to know communities in our synod and to be able to think about how we can partner together. So as I met with Ben and Pastor Blake, we started talking about, what would it be like to learn more from each other and try to create true partnership. So that's one of our exciting spaces together today is you get to see us, we get to see you, we learn a bit more about each other and how we can do church together. So that is again, I get a mic and I get a chance to introduce ourselves and take a little time. But without further ado, I would love to introduce our team who's going to present a bit more about Dia de los Muertos, very closely tied to this time of year when we celebrate All Saints as well. And it is a joy to be able to share that with you. So we will begin with Kate. Thank you so much, Kate.
Thank you so much, Pastora. So it's wonderful to be back here. I was a member at Midvale Lutheran for several years, and so it's fun to be back. And we want to tell you a little bit about the Dia de los Muertos with this idea of learning from one another, right? And sharing in ministry and learning from different traditions. So Dia de los Muertos, if you want to try it with me, actually, I am a Spanish teacher, so this is my Spanish teacher coming out. But if you want to try saying it with me, Dia de los Muertos, Dia de los Muertos, that's great. So Day of the Dead. And it's really something that comes to us from Mexico, but it has very long roots into the history of that area of the world. And actually its earliest roots go back to the Aztec people that were largely in sort of central Mexico. And so if we look back at that time, there was a tradition among the Aztecs of using skulls to honor the dead, right? In that sense, that representation of it. So way, way, way back. And now it is something where, of course, with the combination of the Christian religion and, of course, those practices as well, it has evolved into, I think it's one of those beautiful examples in the world of how cultures come together. And then there's this beautiful manifestation of faith, of Christian faith through the celebration too. So it's a Mexican holiday where, of course, the idea is that they're welcoming back the souls of those who have died. So relatives and folks that mostly relatives, but folks that they knew as well. And of course, like any celebration, it has food and drink and, and a togetherness, right? Everyone comes together. So if you want to think of it, it's kind of a blend really of the Mesoamerican sort of rituals, right, from back then. Of course, our European religions that then arrived in that area and the Spanish culture. And so it's celebrated each year on November 1st and November 2nd. So we'll talk a little bit about the two different days. So November 1st is El Día de los Inocentes. You want to try that one? El Día de los Inocentes. Try it with me. El Día de los Inocentes. And so those who might know a little Spanish, anyone want to guess what that means? The Day of the Innocents. Yeah. And so it's kind of like the Day of the Children. And it corresponds with sort of that All Saints Day. And then November 2nd is officially sort of the Dia de los Muertos. But it's the idea that as of midnight on November 2nd, they're preparing, they're getting ready, and officially the celebration kind of is like all through the night, right? And takes place in the cemeteries. I don't want to give away too much stuff I know you're going to talk about too. But so according to the tradition, the gates of heaven are then opening at midnight, right? And the spirits of children can rejoin their families then for those 24 hours. And the spirits of adults can do the same then on November 2nd. So it's a celebration of that. And then, of course, Day of the Dead is commonly celebrated with altares de muertos or ofrendas. That's a fun word, ofrendas. Try it with me, ofrendas. Yeah, so these, and we'll get to see some of the elements of that here in a minute. It's kind of like special altars or offerings that are placed out for that celebration to honor the children and adults. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to Juan Carlos.
Gracias, Kate. Thank you all of you for being here. Thank you. So how is the Day of the Dead celebrated? As some people think, this is a version Mexican of Halloween, but it's not. Even though it's like it's close to Halloween, we share some ideas like customs and parades, but it's nothing like Halloween. Creciendo en México y teniendo la idea de esta celebración, es algo que mis papás siempre decían. Nosotros no celebramos Halloween, nosotros celebramos el Día de los Muertos.
So growing up in Mexico, he always had the idea from his parents that, we celebrate Dia de los Muertos, we don't celebrate Halloween. But again, not two very different celebrations.
Yes, and esta es una parte muy emocionante y es algo que extraño aparte de la comida de mi país, es crear estos altares. Aunque tienen elementos religiosos y se hacen especialmente para este día, los puedes encontrar en cualquier parte, en las escuelas, en edificios gubernamentales, en calles, plazas. Hay competencias y siempre es muy bonito ver todos estos colores.
So this has always been one of his favorite parts of it, is the ofrendas or altares. You can see on the screen, and you can find these everywhere. They do have religious elements, of course, but you may find them in schools, government buildings, all around. There's actually competitions, of course, to produce beautiful altars, and so it's something you'll see really everywhere.
Como ya lo dijo Kate, es una fusión de elementos aztecas y religiosos que vinieron a América por parte de las religiones europeas. Ofrendas are a very special part of Day of the Dead. So we build this to remember our loved ones. So what you can see in one of the altars, first of all, we have a religious image. So we have the cross, because tenemos la cruz, ya que creemos que nuestros seres queridos están cerca del Creador.
So he was mentioning that this is, of course, the representation of the blending of those beliefs, right? From the Aztecs and the European religions, of course, Christianity, and you see the cross at the top, because of course, this is about, the doors of heaven opening.
Es un claro ejemplo de cómo se reforma y cómo ha estado fusionándose la cultura mexicana con la religión. Entonces, estamos recordando a un ser querido. El altar que creamos tiene que tener la foto de la persona a la que queremos honrar. Y un punto importante es que no solamente honramos a un ser querido que falleció este año, sino en cualquier parte o tiempo de la historia.
And so you can see that these altars or ofrendas are built to commemorate and remember those loved ones. And so you'll see the picture there, but it's not necessarily someone who has died just recently. This goes back, so even someone who has died 25 years ago will still also be there. So it is something that, spans the time.
Cada elemento lo quiero decir que es importante, entonces ya voy a omitir esa palabra, pero las flores, la flor de cempasúchil es la que utilizamos para representar la luz, el camino que nuestro ser querido va a tomar para llegar al altar que le estamos creando.
So you see the use of that sort of traditional orange flower in a lot of these ofrendas, and that is very symbolic of Day of the Dead and representing that journey of our loved ones coming back to visit.
The altar has also different levels, so that represents heaven and earth. So we're remembering and we believe that they're in heaven. So also we have this very special bread, el pan de muertos, sugar skulls, food. We also have articles artículos de la persona a la que estamos honrando. Si era un doctor, puede tener desde sus batas, un profesor, ponemos libros, algo que represente la esencia de nuestro ser querido.
So along with all the stuff you can see here, of course, you put objects that remind us or that were important to that person who died. So if they were a doctor, you'd put something related to that. If they were a teacher, you might put books, and so it's anything that would have been a favorite object or food or whatever of that person.
Ya que el alma viene en un viaje, es importante también tener agua para el espíritu, un espejo, aquí no está representado, pero si tenemos algún espejo para que la persona también vea su apariencia, la comida favorita de la persona.
So interesting, you will often have water, because if you think of it as the soul having to make this long journey back, there will be water. Often there are mirrors for the idea that they would be able to see themselves. ¿Cómo? Yeah, ¿y algo más? No. Yeah, I think that was it. I always worry that I don't remember everything.
Y claro, si estamos recordando a alguien y estamos haciendo oración, también tenemos el incienso que representa esa elevación de nuestra oración. Estos altares no son para adoración, entonces, aunque la mayoría de los mexicanos o países de Sudamérica son cristianos, estos altares hay que también reconocer que no son para adoración, solo para recordar.
So also another important element would be incense, which, because of course, there are, we're praying, right, for the people that have died. And so that carries the prayers, or symbolically carries the prayers up to heaven. But it's really important to note, as Juan Carlos was saying, that these are not altars for, and I'm like suddenly forgetting the word, adoration. Is it that? Yeah. So it's not that you're adoring the altar, right? It's not in that sense at all. It's just a remembrance of those who have died. And so it's commemorating that, but it's not that you're worshiping the altar, if that makes sense.
Una de las preguntas frecuentes es, ¿qué pasa con esta comida? ¿Se desperdicia? ¿Qué hacen? Entonces seguimos con el pensamiento de que el Espíritu solamente toma la esencia, y las familias que se reúnen a celebrar, al finalizar pueden adquirir los alimentos.
One of those common questions is, you see all the delicious food, so what happens to all the delicious food? But it is perfectly normal to enjoy that food with your family that has come together for the celebration, of course. And so that's absolutely what happens.
Trayendo esta tradición a las iglesias, como lo vuelvo a decir, yo creciendo con esta tradición, yo no le veo nada de malo, pero ha habido momentos en los que hemos tenido que quitar elementos solamente porque no hay aceptación. Pero por eso es parte de este proceso, que queremos compartir que no es algo tenebroso y que simplemente estamos siguiendo la tradición de esta cultura.
Yeah, and so this, Juan Carlos was mentioning that sometimes throughout history, I mean, this has always seemed, of course, normal to him growing up with this tradition, but there have been times when you're bringing this tradition, into the different churches, that there's been a need to take out certain elements, because sometimes they might be interpreted in a way that is counter to what's really happening. But really, of course, I think it's like misinterpretation, right? Like it isn't, again, it's sometimes just gets lost in the translation culturally from one to the other. But it is obviously, all the elements have an importance and have a significance.
Este es el altar de muertos que creamos el año pasado en la Parroquia Santa María en Luther Memorial. Un punto muy importante y algo que nos gustó mucho es la apertura y la aceptación que hemos tenido ahí. Realmente en México no hacemos los altares dentro de las iglesias, pero aquí se nos ha dado esa oportunidad.
So this is last year's altar that we had for Parroquia Santa Maria, and we were able to put it, and really, I'm going to embellish this. He didn't say this, but a lot of this is due to Juan Carlos and his amazing ability to just the artistic eye, right? But it was created inside of the sanctuary at Luther Memorial. And he was just mentioning that in Mexico, oftentimes the altars do not actually take place right in the sanctuary. But this was just a beautiful example of the acceptance that we have received, sharing our church building with sharing Luther Memorial's church building with them. And not having to take out any of those elements and being able to have it present in the sanctuary.
I'll add one more thing, as long as I also have a microphone. This, for those who haven't been into that space, this is the columbarium. So it's just a very lovely spot to put an altar. This if you were to be facing, if you're facing this photo as we are, this is also used as like a side altar area. So smaller groups can worship here as well if need be. But I just love that this photo includes the columbarium because there's just so much richness and meaning in that space as well. Other than
I think I forgot to translate too. He was saying like the different levels, you know, maybe you'll get more into that too, but the different levels representing, there's so much symbolism. Yeah.
Thank you. I was about to mention that, but no, thank you. Thank you very much. So we have changed a little in here, like we all want our picture, the picture of our loved ones in the altar, and we always want it on top. So if you go next week to visit us, and you're welcome to bring the picture. So we have a special table so you can put the pictures in there, and we'll do a prayer and remember our loved ones.
Yeah, I don't need to translate that, but I would add to that what is beautiful about it, and largely that is, you know, for logistical reasons, because there's often candles and things like that, and you don't want to have any candle tip over or, you know, on the beautiful altar or cause a problem. So there's practical logistical concerns too.
Okay, now I'll pass this to Pastor Kirsten, and thank you, all of you.
Here's another beautiful photo of what Juan Carlos helped set up last year. It's just between All Saints celebration too at Lutheran Memorial and the altar. I just love these photos. They just embrace so much of what we're about these days. I'm going to take an opportunity to talk a little bit about why this works from a theological perspective as Christians, and really how we are called to live out this process of remembering our loved ones and talking about death more. To give a little context on that, I have a third time call 15 hours a week at Santa Maria. So it's pretty part-time. Thanks to the leadership, it works. So it's really lovely that it makes sense, you know, that we can have this wonderful space and have these wonderful traditions because of our leadership. But the other time that I spend as a full-time chaplain in our palliative care team at UW Health in the Cancer Center. So I love talking about death. It really is wonderful to talk about. And I say that because it helps us talk about life. So really what we're doing here is talking about life and the loved ones that have died, how we can honor and remember them. And that's what I do all day, every day in the clinic. We prepare for death. We work on symptoms. We talk about our spiritual journey as people who are, as the patients I work with, are struggling with a diagnosis that has brought them closer to the understanding of their death. But really, I talk so much about life. How do you want to get to your nephew's wedding? What is it that we can do to help you travel more? How can we feel better physically so that we can talk about our spiritual journey that really is like weighing on your heart? So I'm not fun to have at parties. I talk about my work a lot and no one likes that. It's just I have to like make things up sometimes because I'm just not fun. But I feel so passionately about talking about life. And we have to talk about death if we're actually going to talk about living. So theologically, this all makes sense to me. I grew up in an Anglo setting, and we didn't talk a ton about death because I have German and Norwegian heritage and Polish in there too. So I'm a very stubborn person who doesn't talk about death a ton by nature. But that's what Christ is about, right? We can find life in Christ because we talk about Christ's death and suffering and resurrection. So for that reason, it just makes so much sense to me that we talk about things like Dia de los Muertos. And the even more challenging horror sometimes is the Day of the Innocents, when we talk about little ones who have not had the chance to live full lives in the way that we have had the advantage to. So if we talk about life from a theological perspective, Jesus really does call us to embrace all that is on this altar, and Jesus calls us to be able to talk about it with each other, remember with each other, cry with each other, so that we can have the chance then to also live our lives more fully and live out our Christian mission to walk with one another as Jesus calls us to. So all that is to say, I just, every time we get to this season of the year, I am just filled with joy and love because I get to honor and remember those special ones in my life. I have 3 children. They also talk about death a lot because that's what I do. And my middle child, I will often look at the stars and say, Mom, there's Gigi, my husband's great grandmother. Gigi's in that star, or my dog Tesla's in that star. And then we can talk about them and remember them. So Gigi's picture will probably go on the altar this year. We might bring the dog as well. She might hang out on the altar because she's also a blessed, wonderful part of our life and our story. And we remember her in addition to all those other people. So it's uncomfortable to sit in these spaces sometimes. But what I have really learned to love, and not learned to love, what's easy to love about the community of Santa Maria and all these traditions that we hold is that we can come together more fully as a community when we choose to embrace these spaces, when we choose to embrace these traditions of the mix of cultures that we come from. So I didn't share before, but Santa Maria, we represent probably 9 or 10 different countries and territories throughout Central and South America, North Central and South America. And so while this is, as Juan Carlos shared, a very Mexican tradition, it is something that is celebrated all throughout Latin America and something that we can come together and really enjoy as a community of faith. We'll also have it's a very busy time of year for us in many ways, but coming up, we also have Posadas, which is a tradition of the journey of Mary and Joseph to the inn. And that is celebrated differently in every country and every culture throughout Latin America. And then we have Our Lady of Guadalupe, which is an incredible way to celebrate the Virgin Mary appearing in Mexico, and how we navigate and share that space together with the richness of other native cultures as well. So it's a very busy time of year, lots of life, lots of death, lots of celebration, and we eat. So lots of food in our space together as well. Go ahead, Kate.
I was just gonna, sort of piggyback on what she was saying. And it's so important to know that Parroquia Santa Maria is a small congregation, but we have immense diversity in our group. And it is beautiful to see how the different countries will bring their traditions around different celebrations, and everyone will have a chance to experience them. And, it's not necessarily, it's such a multicultural space for being, we're a small congregation, but we have so much diversity, and it's beautiful that people from different countries get to experience different manifestations of faith. And I can speak to myself, not having grown up with, for example, Dia de los Muertos in my family tradition. It's amazing to see, but to share the same Christian faith, and then to come into a space where there's another way to express my faith and the beliefs that I have has been so beautiful. It just opens a richness in your life. Like suddenly, I grew up with All Saints and All Souls Day and things like that. But then to see this, it's like, wow, it gives more meaning to my own traditions and to my own beliefs. And because there's such a richness to seeing how different folks manifest their faith around different topics. And so I know that all of our congregation gets to experience that as well, being from different countries, and we get to all have those moments. Like you said, the posada, not everyone does the posada, but then they all do the posada, and then, or someone brings food. And I was so excited that someone brought Guatemalan enchiladas, which I know simply because my daughter's Guatemalan and we go to Guatemala a lot, and we've had those on my favorite food. But to see everyone go like, I've never had Guatemalan enchiladas. There's so much of that multicultural sharing that goes on in that community, in our community, I should say.
Going a bit, during the pandemic, we held our own, which was pretty amazing. And we had folks from all around, like literally all around the world, watching our live stream of the Zoom worship that we would do. And it was, between like 250 and 350 a week, which is not the typical worship audience for us. But how awesome that we could reach folks in a way that was just very different during the pandemic. And then part of that, I'm going to that space is the Posadas during the pandemic. We invited folks to bring their own traditions from their country and present. So we had 7 or 8 nights, maybe not that many. But so we would have a night where we did Posadas together on Zoom, and it was the Venezuelan Posadas. And then we had the Mexican Posadas, and then we had the Colombian Posadas and the Uruguayan. I mean, it was just so wonderful. So truly that's a very unique thing, I think, amongst Spanish-speaking worshiping communities in the ELCA, to be so incredibly diverse in culture. And it's just such a gift for us to have that, not only within Santa Maria, also in Lutheran Memorial, also with our other partners, also within our synod and the greater church. So it's just such a wonderful community to be a part of, and what a joy to share these spaces together. I do want to provide space for questions before we start talking about invitations to join us in these worshiping spaces. I might not be the best person to answer the questions, so I'll pass off the mic if we need to as well.
I may have missed this, but what look like flags, the colorful, so what are those?
Mm-hmm.
Are they prayer flags?
They look a lot like prayer flags, don't they?
Oh,
we have another.
Yeah.
Oops.
Sí, olvidé mencionar el papel picado. Otro elemento principal representa la vida, el movimiento con el aire. Entonces, esto es muy típico tener desde imágenes con calaveras, flores, frases, y es algo que siempre debe de tener un altar.
So it's called papel picado. Try it with me. Here we go. Papel picado. And it's chiseled paper. It's like tissue paper that has been cut into, almost like if you've ever done snowflakes or something out of, but it's cut with images. And often for Day of the Dead, it would be, skulls or other kind of elements from the ofrendas as well that are chiseled in there. And Juan Carlos was saying it kind of, because it flows a little bit with the air, and kind of moves in a bright colors, it's kind of representing life. Mm-hmm.
Well, the reason I was asking that is I'm reminded when I see those of like Tibetan prayer flags, that kind of thing. It looks very much that way. And that's why I had the question. And I was curious that there was no presentation about that. Thank you.
Other questions? I looked on your website this week, and I don't have a lot of background with your congregation, but you are inviting people to come and bring remembrances this coming week. Could you talk about that?
Absolutely. So part of the joy of being able to meet with you all and get to know each other is that Santa Maria truly wants to walk together in this journey of navigating what it is to be Christian community together that looks a little bit different for each community. So we would like to invite all of you to join us for Wednesday. This is Wednesday, November 2nd, from noon until 5 p.m. To be able to come and bring a photo of your loved one to the altar, or whatever, maybe their favorite food, have time for prayer. Lutheran Memorial is situated right downtown, and there's, so college students, you have to mind them a little bit, but parking isn't too bad if you park underneath the campus center or take a bus there. There are all sorts of buses that go by there. But anytime on Wednesday between noon and 5, Juan Carlos and Judith, and I'll probably pop by as well to be part of a space for prayer and remembrance. And then on Sunday, we will also celebrate in our Mass, which is at 12:30. So it's nice because a lot of communities are worshiping earlier than that. But if you want to join us at 12:30 this coming Sunday, we will also have special worship for Dia de los Muertos and Dia de Todos Santos, All Saints Day, to remember our loved ones. So it will be a bit of a unique experience. If you look at our bulletin, you'll probably be able to figure out where we are in worship based on where you are in your worship in English. So there are a lot of very similar parts. It feels very similar, even if you don't speak Spanish. So that's another invitation to join us to celebrate your loved ones who have died and remember them. Anything else to add to that? Okay. Yeah, we would love for you to join us, and we'll have a few other events as well. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Next Sunday, we have a chocolate. Oh, sorry. Oh, okay. Next Sunday after the church, like around 1:30, we have chocolate hot and bread. And would be one lady to paint the face from adult or any children. So everybody's welcome.
Yeah, we're really excited about the face painter.
You're all welcome.
Because Julie saw this person doing face painting, which is a very typical way of celebrating too, is to have kids and adults have their face painted. So it's a fun event, and we hope that you might join us.
We have a garden here of 600 square feet, and this past year we gardened with the family from Ukraine, and we'd like to consider who we might garden with next year. And if there are members of the congregation that would like to join our group here, we would love to partner with you, and you can have all the produce, plant whatever kind of peppers you want, and we would love to forge a partnership in gardening. So if you have any questions or would like to explore that, let us know. Thank you.
That sounds fabulous.
Thank
I
you.
will, could we put you in touch, or are you the person to be in touch with about that? Yeah. Okay, perfect. Judith, would it be possible to connect you, the two of you, for that? That'd be fabulous. As I mentioned, we'd love to eat. We have a lot of folks who like to garden as well. One of our members is very well known for his garden in his backyard. And I feel like they're gardening all summer. So I love that idea. Thank you. This is what shared ministry looks like, right? And gardening is a great way to come together and get to know each other too. That's great. I love that.
Could you share some of the countries of origin that make up your membership?
Yeah. Oh gosh, I'm going to miss some. Do you want to do it or do you want me? Okay. So we have Puerto Rico is well represented, Mexico, Uruguay, Argentina, Venezuela, Bolivia. What am I missing? Peru.
Guatemala.
Oh my gosh, lo siento. Ecuador. Panama. Oh, Panama. Yeah. ¿Qué más? Creo que es todo.
Y los Estados Unidos.
Estados Unidos, yeah. United States. I'm Minnesotan, so it's not very exciting, but yeah, very well represented community. Pretty incredible. Good question.
And then how roughly, what's the size of the congregation?
Yeah, so it's tricky to describe membership in a community that you know, we kind of navigate life in a reality that not everybody wants to share their information or be more official with membership. That said, we have many very active members. We worshiped before the pandemic anywhere right around maybe 40, 45, 35. Now we're right around, like, on a low day it's 20, on a higher day it's 50 or more, I would say. Is that accurate? And then for special days, Our Lady of Guadalupe, oh my goodness, that's a totally different story, right? So a lot more visitors there that day as well, as Christmas or Easter or other days. Yeah. Other questions or?
I'm not sure when this was. It was pre-pandemic, and you were still out at All Saints, and you invited us to come for the Posada. And so many of us from this congregation attended that, and it was just a wonderful experience. And we were so welcomed, and that had wonderful food afterward. So I wonder, do you have time to talk a little bit about that? I know you mentioned it briefly.
So yeah, we will have a posada this year. Will be December the 16th. It's Friday. All of you are invited. Algo que hay que tener en cuenta es que tenemos que caminar. Es algo tradicional de las posadas, y los que tuvieron la experiencia de visitarnos, creo que vivieron esa parte de estar en movimiento, buscando dónde alojarnos para recibir a Jesús.
So yes, we will have a posada that you are invited to December 16th. And he was mentioning about, you know, that it does involve walking, you know, and there's a lot of movement and excitement to it, and singing. Whether you know the song or not, you just sing. and food. And yes, we do hope to revive that tradition, because during the pandemic, we haven't had the big in-person, but hopefully this year.
And there is accessibility for wheelchairs or other needs for mobility. So whether we walk around the building or the block, there's accessibility to enter into the building again and go up the different levels, up and down the different levels. So it's also a possibility if you're not up for walking a ton or able to. I don't think there were any online questions, no?
I
think that was me.
I've missed this when you spoke about your tripart professional work. Which area of UW Health? That was not clear to me. If you could clarify that.
Yeah, no problem. So I'm like my office, I'm housed in the cancer center. I'm a chaplain by background. So I'm downtown at UH, the big hospital that UW has, but they have a cancer clinic there.
What clinic are you saying?
Cancer oncology clinic.
Okay.
Yep. And so a lot of my patients are oncology patients. My full position is for palliative medicine. So we have a whole team of folks. I mean, it's a whole other presentation that I love giving also. But palliative care is not hospice. It's simply when people have serious illness, we provide that extra layer of support. So it's a lot of conversations with folks who have serious illness or loved ones when their loved ones do. And I've been able to be really creative in that role, which I adore and love.
Thank you.
Yeah. It seems scary, but I'm really not a scary person.
Actually, we love how when we get to the season of Lent, she always says that's her favorite time of year.
I love Lent.
Which isn't, I mean, I don't know. You don't always hear that about Lent. So
though, like 2 years ago, I was kind of lented out after the pandemic. I was like, enough, like, let's just get to Easter. Thank you very much. But enough death for 1 decade. Yeah.
I'm curious how you can imagine more partnering. Jeff mentioned the gardening, and how much support do you get from the Synod? Because I know when you're a relatively new congregation, you really need a lot of support, not just financial, but spiritual and other ways.
Absolutely. It's a tricky journey being a specialized ministry. And especially when we've had a lot of change with regard to pastoral roles, or I should say pastors, and then within the Synod as well, a lot of changes. And then we moved. We've just done changing. We've been changing for a long time. But yeah, like kind of held to our core being at Santa Maria. So support-wise, in theory, ministries like ours get 5 years of financial funding from the greater church, from the Synod, and all of that. Bishop Joy has been wonderful and really supportive of us. And so right now, a lot of my role for the past year, 6 to 9 months or so, has been, how do we make this sustainable? Certainly spiritually, emotionally, traditionally, and with worship, we're a very sustainable community. In the same breath, recognizing that financial resources are hard to come by oftentimes in our community, and also it's a different tradition. In the Catholic tradition, a lot of times folks are used to having things kind of, the payment system is different, right? Offering is different in a lot of Catholic traditions, especially throughout Latin America. And so it's been a tricky but wonderful challenge to be able to rethink church and rethink how we navigate that. So partnering, one of my goals is to get to know people. It's been hard to see other churches like ours struggle so much because there is just such a separation between the communities that are specialized and the often very white communities that are kind of trucking along and doing their own wonderful, amazing things. So partnerships, in my goal is to be able to kind of bridge some of those spaces and to be able to get to know each other and share traditions and eat and do all those things that help. Spiritual support certainly is always welcome. We're a very prayerful group. And our community prayers, Juan Carlos posts them on Facebook and tags all of us, and we share community prayers during our prayers of the people. again, in our community and throughout the world in different places as well. And I think really that curiosity and desire to get to know each other is so crucial, because then we feel more like neighbors. I love that, by the way. More like neighbors and less like we know that there's a Spanish speaking community in the Synod. We just don't know a whole lot about them. Kate, you look like you're going to say something, so feel free.
Just another way to, another couple of forms of support. One would be that we are very active in social media. And so we invite you to follow us Juan Carlos can tell you exactly where to follow us. And I can probably figure it out too, but it is another wonderful way to keep up on what's happening, to participate in the community, because we do have this active online presence. Another way Mani was just sharing with me is through music. So Mani is one of our amazing musicians that he's percussionist. It's very exciting. And he was just mentioning too that we use a lot of different, music is very important. There's a lot of different musical traditions from the different areas that our members are from. And we try to really represent that in our service, through the different styles of music. And it's also a way that we have partnered with other congregations. So there have been times when we have, brought music to another worship service of another church and things like that. So it's another opportunity because, music being the universal language, right? One of those universal languages, I should say. So thank you, Mani.
Yeah.
Yes, I had a question, kind of thought of about the theology of the cross, and like kind of curious if you have any thoughts about how, connection with Day of the Dead, obviously, quite in your work too, as in chaplain with an oncology ward. That type of work as well. Do you kind of think about that? How does that kind of inform you? Stuff like that. I don't know where I'm exactly going.
I am hearing you, and I think I'm hearing your question too. There's something so important about recognizing suffering. I say we from my own context and demographic of growing up in Minnesota into this white family, but I did not grow up in a space where it was suffering you just kind of take care of and don't talk about it and just figure it out and then keep going, to no one's fault. It was just kind of, so we didn't do a whole lot of suffering talk, or we just kind of fixed things and made them better. But it's different when you can sit and recognize suffering is so real. And I think the pandemic has done that for a lot of us who identify as white. That's a global experience that we maybe hadn't had to have individual suffering, yes, but as a community suffering, there's a different dynamic when your kids can't go to school and when you can't worship together and you can't see your friends and people are dying and you can't have funerals. All of those things are so hard, and that's such real suffering for each and every one of us. We've all experienced that together. So I think of the theology of the cross as also being really a part of that journey of recognizing when suffering is happening, sitting in the suffering. It's part of this life process that's awful and icky and we want to change. And in the same breath, recognizing that beyond this life, that we have this gift and grace of the resurrection to be able to help us in those times, recognizing that God will always be with us, is always at our side. And that even if it doesn't look the way we want it to, that God is there in the presence of it all. Does that kind of answer and tie in a little bit? Yeah, that's how I see a lot of my work, and certainly in navigating this space together of Dia de los Muertos, that's definitely applicable too. Yeah.
With your physical location right now at Luther Memorial, it makes me think of the Lutheran campus ministry right next door. Mm-hmm. And what relationships, involvement, connections are there with respect to the campus community or the students who come, and whether there's then a connection to your church?
Yeah, we do have a few folks who are university students. One is a student who is from Puerto Rico, and his parents have accompanied him as well to be in Madison, and they kind of happened upon us. We're on campus, as you said, and so they happened upon us, and we're able to have that family space together on Sunday mornings as well. And so there is some connection there. Pastor Emily Twitey, who some of you may know, and I are very close friends. She's a dear human, and she and I have known each other for years. So we've often talked about what does that look like. In a perfect world, I'd have all the time to figure that out and all the energy. One of my thoughts is if and when campus ministry has food ministry or lunch ministry happening again, that's a really wonderful way to connect. But what I'm often seeing as far as students is that students on campus are English-speaking students who maybe might want a connection too with a Spanish-speaking ministry, maybe not. So oftentimes it is folks who are bilingual or speak more than 2 languages that would be engaging with that LCM ministry that could possibly be a part of Santa Maria's kind of worshiping space as well. So there's always more to be done. I think there is potential in that. And as LCM keeps growing and navigating what this life looks like with post-pandemic life, then hopefully that relationship can keep going too. Yeah. Thanks.
I very much appreciated your explanations of Day of the Dead and the meanings. Can you talk just briefly about the Mary and Joseph event you mentioned?
Yeah.
So that's Las Posadas. Kate will help me to translate this because it's easier for me in Spanish. Es algo que está en la Biblia, es bíblico, entonces de ahí nos basamos. Es una tradición que también viene de los españoles a México. Era una forma de catequizar, ¿recuerdas esa palabra? En el que nos preparamos para el nacimiento de Cristo con 9 días de anticipación. Entonces, así es como se les mostró a los indígenas cómo recibir o celebrar lo que es la Navidad.
So it's a tradition definitely with a biblical basis, and also coming from the heritage of the Spanish, coming into the Americas. And it's really kind of showing the journey that Mary and Joseph took when they were looking for shelter, right? So if you think about the song, and I'm adding this part, but if you think about the song talks about like how they're trying to find a place to stay, right? And the song goes back and forth like, no, you can't stay here, and yes, you can. And it's a song that you sing traditionally with it, but it's commemorating that journey, right? To find shelter, to be able to have baby Jesus. And it's another way of those 9 days, right? 9 days leading up to Christmas to commemorate. I like it. To me, like from my background, I feel like what's beautiful about it is that it humanizes Mary and Joseph and the struggles, right? And the fact that the stresses they went through and like how there's just, to me, that's how it spoke to me. But it's that commemorating of that journey. When they were trying to find shelter. And then of course, at the end of the song, you get in because they realize that it's, Mary and Joseph, and then there's party. But so after the struggle comes the celebration, but it is a biblical basis. Yeah.
And then we close the Christmas season out on the opposite end with Three Kings Day. So I love celebrating the whole season, right? Like Christmas Eve is not just Christmas, right? We have so much around Christmas that was to be celebrated. And so we also have traditions around Los Tres Reyes to be able to close out the Christmas season to Epiphany.
Yeah, the Three Kings Day would be January 6th. But again, that would be another opportunity to join us as well. We will celebrate it somewhere right around that. That's why it's a good idea to be on social media with us, and you can find out exactly when things are happening. But that's a beautiful celebration too. And oftentimes we have people who dress up as the Three Kings. And the tradition being that you would receive your Christmas gifts from the kings rather than from like Santa Claus, potentially, in some areas, definitely I know it's really big in Puerto Rico, so we should almost have Judy and Money talk about it, but it is something that people recognize throughout the Spanish speaking countries, but in certain areas, of course, is a huge thing. I remember being in Mexico right before the holidays, and my kids, we were walking through a mall and they got to go see the Three Kings, like instead of Santa Claus. So it's, it has that connotation of like, you might write a letter to the Three Kings, and they might bring you gifts on January 6th. Exacto. So then you have the rosca de reyes, which is another special bread food. It's all about the food, which is in the shape of a crown. And it is often, you know, with like candied fruits and things. So it kind of looks like a crown. And then inside of that, when you eat that on the Three Kings Day, there will be little baby Jesus, little plastic baby Jesus figures. And if you end up with a baby Jesus in your piece of bread, then you are responsible to bring, well, tamales or other food for the celebration of the Candelaria, which is at the beginning of February, the celebration of light. And it's Candelaria is like about candles and things like that. So, so there's another celebration into February. So it just keeps going.
Yeah. More food.
And it's always fun to be like, did you get a baby Jesus? Now, like when we were doing this virtually, it was sort of like, be sure to fess up that you got the baby Jesus in your bread. So
was it last year that everyone got a baby Jesus? It was like Jesus just kind of was prolific, and like we were texting back and forth like, oh, I got a Jesus. Oh, Pastor John got a Jesus. Oh, Berkeley got a Jesus. Like I don't know what happened, but he was very excited last year to be a part of it.
And there are many wonderful bakeries in this city that make rosca de reyes. So if you want to take that tradition and experience it a bit.
I do want to add just a little piece about what it looks like from a racism perspective, anti-racism perspective. I often will ask our leaders, like, is it okay if we get our faces painted, if I as a white person would get my face painted at our celebration this last week? Or, you know, I think it's really important to also to be mindful of like our role in the greater church and how we are like working to navigate what racism looks like in our church and how we can, you know, continue to work against that. And so that while that's not something that I'm preaching about every Sunday, I think it is still a really important space for us to recognize with our privilege as white folks, recognizing that we're like a 94% or whatever white community in the ELCA, and that there is just so much work to be done as well. I say that because I hope that you receive these invitations very genuinely. We are very excited to have you with us for any of these celebrations and all of them, because we know that you all bring this welcoming space. We hope you receive that welcoming space, and it truly is this space of desire to get to know each other. So just know that those conversations continue, and also that this truly is a welcome and an invitation for you to join us in these traditions that may not be yours. So please join us.
You said something just a while ago about the beginning of February. I remember learning, well, we think about Groundhog Day at the beginning of February here, and sometimes in Wisconsin, we make a big deal out of Groundhog Day, but really the beginning of February is halfway between the solstice in December and the equinox in March. And so it's not random, and it's not really based on a groundhog. It's based on, we seem as people to want to be acknowledging the darkness comes, and then it's balanced, and then there's halfway there even. And we think about those kinds of things, and there's more commonality in when we celebrate, or that there are foods, that there are acting out the story of Joseph and Mary traveling and things like that. And when we look at the commonality, I think we can see other people's traditions as so similar to our own traditions. And you've done so well with that today. And I think that means a lot to us. So thank you.
Thank you. And it also gives we were just chatting back and forth here, some context to the Candelaria we hadn't thought about. That celebration of light at the beginning of February.
Are there any other questions? Well, if not, let me thank our guests and thank all of you for coming today and having a very helpful, informative dialogue. Y otra vez, muchas gracias por todos para venir aquí. Y más importante, gracias a la maestra por no darnos un examen de vocabulario. Y ojalá para nosotros es el primer paso de trabajar más juntos en el futuro. Entonces, buen día a todos.
Muchísimas gracias por estarnos apoyando siempre y abrir las puertas, porque ustedes son una de las congregaciones que siempre tienen los ojos viéndonos, perdón. Gracias a ustedes pudimos tener a la pastora Kirsten antes de ser llamada como pastora, haciendo suplencias los domingos, porque al igual que las comunidades, voy a decir anglos, que hace falta pastores, la comunidad latina todavía lo sufre más.
So this is just a special thank you to all of you for opening your doors to Santa Maria. We're very excited, as Juan Carlos was mentioning, to always have your support and your interest. And also a special thank you because some of your fundraising earlier on did help to pay for pastor supply as we were waiting to be able to call Pastor Kirsten. And so it actually helped us to have Pastor Kirsten with us, right, during that call process. And so that fundraising was extremely helpful to us. And above all, it's the relationship we value, right, with all of you. So thank you so much.
Thanks. Yep. So next week, we're going to have the first of 3 adult forum sessions talking about Christian nationalism. And our speaker will be Reverend Libby Howe. And you can read her bio in the newsletter, but hopefully you'll come back and see you next week. Thank you.